Welcome, everyone, to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. And for this month, June, the 83,000 or so members of the Girlfriend Book Club chose Go as a River as their pick after a pretty arduous 4-day voting period. So I'm so glad that you did. Once again, you have not let me down. I read this in 2 days and I absolutely loved Go as a River. So we're so delighted to welcome Shelley Reed, the author, this evening. Welcome, Shelley.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm so happy to be here. And oh my gosh, what an honor for you to choose my book. Thank you
It
so
really
much.
is. It's quite a rigorous process. So when they choose your book, they really want to read your book.
Well, thank you. It really means the world to me.
So I think this is your debut novel, if I'm not correct. Did
Yeah.
you expect this kind of response to this book? Because I saw some of the blurbs on the book. I mean, you have Bonnie Garmus, author of Lessons in Chemistry. She was also a previous Girlfriend Book Club pick, and she was on with me as well. But to get these blurbs from these famous authors, did you expect this kind of reaction?
Oh my goodness, no. um, the whole journey with this novel has been so unexpected once I finally put it out into the world. That's why I'm just blown away with gratitude to my publishers, to my publicists, to the marketing, to everyone who actually helped me get this debut book out into the world, because it's actually very rare for a debut to get this much attention and to get in people's hands. And we can talk about it, but I am 58 years old and it came out last year. I was 57 years old in my debut novel, my first book in the world. I'm very proud of it. But what everything has happened with it has been such a pleasant, remarkable surprise.
It's incredible. The reaction has been just superb. So,
Yes.
I've read about this a little bit, but can you explain to everybody where you got the idea for this book?
Oh,
It's based
yeah.
on true events, I believe.
Yes, I chipped away at this novel for about 12 or 13 years. I was a full-time teacher. I was a mom. As many of you understand, I had a lot of other things going on. A lot of the writing of this book is a bit of a blur. So I'm actually really grateful that I do remember where it all began. Um, I was out camping one evening by myself in the upper end of the valley. So I live here in the Gunnison Valley where the novel is set. I live every day of my life at about 9,000 feet elevation, high in the Colorado Rockies, the most stunningly beautiful landscape you can imagine. I tried to channel a lot of my love for this landscape into the book. And that is where I was camping one evening when the scene in the book, for those of you who have read it, it comes in about page 120.
Right.
I ended up putting the beginnings of this book directly in a scene that my main character, Victoria Nash, witnesses. It's the scene when the mother deer comes shuffling out of the bushes, and
Right.
one little beautiful fawn follows her, and then a second fawn follows her who's much weaker and more frail than the first.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I just really locked eyes with that doe and felt her in my heart and my soul, mother to mother, because
Wow.
I knew there was no way she was going to be able to keep that second baby alive. And the empathy for that and the sadness for that just kind of welled up inside of me. And Victoria Nash was sort of born from there, delving into, the vulnerabilities of motherhood, the vulnerabilities of loving, the vulnerabilities and the challenges of being a woman in the world. That's where it all began. And then, you know, lovely Victoria, who I love so much, just kind of kept poking at me, just kept
Yeah.
nudging me over those years until I finally was able to tell her full story. And I'm so grateful for that moment because it really turned me back to my writing life. At the
Right.
time, I really wasn't writing a whole lot. So yeah, I'm really grateful
So
that's what
you
it
were out camping, is that right? Or
was. Yeah, I was out
yeah,
camping.
okay. And so that gave you the whole idea, that scene kind of
That's
started the
me.
whole book.
Yes, isn't that interesting? One
It
little
is.
thing, it's very common for me to be out in the wilderness. It's very
Right.
common for me to see wildlife. Why that one moment sparked all of this, I will never know, but I'm really grateful that it did.
Did you tell anybody, like, when you got home, my gosh, I just experienced something so amazing and I have to
No,
write
but
about it"? No?
that evening after the deer moved on, I ran to my tent and I grabbed my journal, which I always have with me, and I just
Right.
wrote it all down exactly as it happened. I didn't really know why I was writing it down. No, throughout the entire writing process, I actually shared the entire thing with very few people.
Really?
Even people who are closest to me didn't even know that I was working on a novel. I wrote this book in a very private, very quiet way, never knowing, never even imagining where it might go if and when I ever finished it. I was just so focused on my love for this character,
Right.
Victoria Nash, and wanting to tell her story as well as I possibly could, that it was really just between me and her. It took years before I shared it with anyone, and then I think it was just my husband and my daughter,
Amazing.
which makes, the fact that it's now, a bestseller in pockets all over the world even more astounding to me, because it went from being very private to very
Right.
public, and, so it's
So
kind of a
what was your writing process like that if you were doing it so quietly? I mean, did you set aside if you were teaching, did you set aside a certain number of hours a day to work on it, or did you try on weekends to work on it, or I guess
no.
it took many years to for this to come to fruition, correct?
Many years, 12 to 13 years, I would
Wow.
say. No, and I think that's why it took so long. Again, so many of your listeners, of your book club members, fully understand that there are only so many hours in the day.
Right.
And as a busy working mom, my creativity and my imagination and many of the things that were just for me were really bumped to the bottom of my list. And that's okay, because I loved being a professor. I loved being a mom. I really poured my heart and soul into those endeavors. I was a teacher for 30 years.
Right.
And I didn't clear this space in any sort of regular way or any sort of meaningful way to work on this book. As I said, I kind of tried to ignore it and it wouldn't let me. It was almost like a story that insisted on being told. So I would write talking to my phone when I was driving, or jot down a crazy note, or literally I was making, dinner for my family, and I'd think of an idea and I'd jot it down on a little Post-it note or something, a napkin, whatever. And I started just throwing those ideas into a file, and
Right.
soon that file grew big enough that I started understanding that this was a story. And then it grew big enough that I was like, oh my goodness, I think this is a novel. I had never written a novel before. I had a background in writing and literary studies. I mostly wrote short fiction and poetry. I'd never really even imagined myself a novelist, but I soon understood that that's what this story was going to require. And then I turned to like spiral notebooks. I always had one with me and I would jot down, but it grew very organically. And in those 12 or 13 years, I experienced a lot of difficulties in my own life, a lot of challenges, a lot of deep experiences. And, I became richer and deeper as a human being because of those challenges. And I know that the narrative and the story of Victoria became deeper and richer as well.
Right.
And so really, I feel like the timing and the progression of it ended up being all perfect.
Mm.
Again, I think your book club members will appreciate this. There's no way I could have written this novel as a younger woman.
Right.
I very much appreciate older women, all of the experiences and the wisdom that we gather, all of the strength that we have to dig down in our heart and soul and discover in order to move forward.
Mm.
I poured all of that into this book, but I had to learn it first myself
Right.
for it to come through as authentically as I wanted to. So I think the journey was long, but it was just right.
Just right. So it sounds like Victoria was probably pretty easy for you to write. I'm wondering if there's any scene or chapter or character, Wilson Moon or whoever. I mean, was there any part of it that was a little bit more challenging for you to get your head around and
Oh,
create?
yes. Yes, yes. I appreciate that question, actually. Yes, Victoria Nash, she's very much like my ancestors. I'm a fifth generation Coloradoan. So I recognize Victoria in my great grandparents, my grandmothers, my mom, the ranchers and farmers here in my valley. The landscape was easy for me to write because I'm immersed in it all the time. Hands down, the most difficult part of writing this book was the character of Wilson Moon.
Mhm.
The novel becomes about home and family and where we turn when these things are
Mhm.
lost. It's very much about place and displacement. And I just knew that I could not write a story about displacement in the American West without including,
Right.
on some level, the level that I was able. I had to include the indigenous experience,
Right.
because well before the farmers and ranchers of the Iola area were displaced for Blue Mesa Reservoir, which is a true story. That's the
Right.
true part of this book. Was the Ute people who were so violently displaced from that same area. So I wanted to bring in this character of Wilson Moon, who really is a child of nowhere. He
Mhm.
is the product of generational displacement. But I didn't want to cross any boundaries of appropriation, or I wanted to be as respectful as possible and let Wilson Moon sort of own his own story. So I don't go too much into his backstory, but choosing what to include and what to leave out with Wilson Moon's story. I didn't want to shy away from the racism, and I wanted to explore, what a different relationship he had to the land than Victoria
Right.
had. Um, Hands down, the hardest part of this book. I did many, many revisions around the character of Wilson Moon. Gratefully, I think that with the amount of respect that I sought to give that character, I've had a lot of good feedback from Indigenous friends and readers that they were grateful that I included the character, and so I'm glad that I put as much time and effort into his character. Yeah.
So you referenced the title of the book, "Go as a River," a few times in the novel. Um, just for those few that might not have read the book yet, what does
Yes.
"Go as a River" mean to you when you're thinking about your life?
Yes. Oh, yes. I spend a lot of time observing wild rivers, and the three rivers in the novel, the Gunnison River, the Animas, and the North Fork of the Gunnison. These rivers in the novel almost become characters in and of themselves. And really, the story I wanted to tell, use the dominant metaphor of the river, is that rivers. The power of a wild river, it always finds a way to move forward.
Mhm.
When we find a way to go as a river, what that means to me is that we can keep moving forward against obstacle, against anything that might come in our way. Wild rivers go up and around and under obstacle. They carve new banks when necessary, but they find a way to move forward. That has been a crucial lesson in my own life, and it certainly was a crucial lesson that Victoria Nash had to learn early on in the book. As you mentioned, Wilson Moon tells Victoria that he will go as a river, and she sort of pretends she knows what that means. But what we learn is that she's young and naive. She has no sense of her own strength or her own power, which I think is true for a lot of young women. And it's the entire course of the novel is Victoria learning what it means to go as a river, to gather yourself up and discover your strength and find a way to move forward, even in the face of grief and loss. And I really love her for that. I think that's my absolute favorite thing about Victoria Nash is she never gives up.
Right. So it must have been hard for you to leave her when you finished the book. When you
Yeah.
might have made that last edit or something, you must have been
Yes.
quite sad.
Um, so hard. She lives inside of me. It's shocking to think that she's actually a fictional character. I really feel like, in fact, a funny story is when all of this incredible success started happening with my book, my mom, bless her heart, was like, I feel like we need to call Victoria and tell her. That's what my mom said.
She's a
And I thought,
success.
gosh, that's how alive she is in our hearts. Luckily, because the book has done well, I've basically been on book tour, both in the United States and throughout Europe for almost a year and a half now. So I've been able to, because we did some preliminary touring before the novel was released, and then it was released
Right.
last March. And it's only just gained momentum,
It
here in the
has.
US and all over the world. And I've been so grateful to get to talk with readers about my beloved Victoria Nash. So she's still very much with
So
me.
with you, yeah. So this also was a real love letter to, Colorado, in my mind anyway. It seems
Yes.
like probably everybody's gonna wanna go to Gunnison Valley after reading this book. So what do
Yeah.
you love about living in Colorado?
Oh my goodness. As I said, I'm a fifth generation Coloradoan, so this is just so in my bones. My great great grandparents were homesteaders,
Oh,
and all the generations after them, farmers and ranchers and mountain climbers. The land has meant so much to my family that I really just don't know any other way. My
right.
children are both named after mountains here in the Gunnison
Oh, really?
Valley. Yeah, they both love the natural world and love it like I do. They feel very comfortable in it. We climb mountains together. The wilderness and wild landscapes in the natural world and family, those two things mean everything to me. They define my entire life.
Mhm.
In the natural world, the humility, that I gather, especially from climbing big mountains, the humility, the instruction, the eternal just sense of it all
Right.
instantly puts smaller problems in perspective
Yeah.
for me. It's taught me so much about how to live my best life. And I do hope people come to visit Colorado and experience some of these magnificent mountains. But I've also talked to so many readers that said the book has inspired them just to recultivate their own relationship with nature,
Yeah,
even if that means popping out into their backyard and listening to the birds return in the spring, or being in a park, or whatever is accessible to you.
right,
I do think that human nature relationship is so essential to our lives. And I think far too many people have become disconnected from that.
right,
And so you don't have to climb a 14,000-foot mountain in Colorado the way I do to experience it. I think even just studying a bug or a bird or the way a leaf unfolds in the
right.
spring will remind you how important it is to our lives. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you did mention that you were a teacher for 3 decades, I believe,
Three
but I
decades.
think you always wanted to be a writer or you loved writing as a kid, right? And then you kinda
Yeah.
got diverted and became a teacher. So you're not teaching anymore, is that right? Or
I'm not teaching anymore, and I loved it, but I was ready to be done. Yes, I knew from very young that I wanted to be a writer. I was always writing poems and short stories. I just saw the world in a very narrative
right.
way. I think I was born to this in some strange way. I wrote it my first book when I was 9 years old.
Oh my
It was a
goodness.
66-page book about a porcupine.
Wow.
What's funny about that is my mom, bless her heart, saved a lot of my things that I wrote when I was a kid. And, when all this started happening with my book, she brought it down from the attic and we're going through it being like, wow. And I pulled this book out that I wrote when I was 9 years old, and on the envelope, I gave myself a copyright. That's what what a geeky little 9-year-old I was. But also on there was the assignment from my 3rd grade teacher. I was supposed to write a 2-page short story, and I wrote a
66
66.
pages?
Yeah, so I
Amazing.
it was so beautiful for me to see into little 9-year-old Shelley how much I loved telling stories. And
Right.
interestingly, the entire book was about nature and the forest, because I was lucky enough to grow up with,
Wow.
a lot of time in the natural world. I went on to the University of Denver. All my undergraduate and graduate study was all in creative writing and literary studies.
Mm,
But then I was awarded a teaching fellowship when I was in grad school. And I just absolutely fell in love with teaching. I'm always looking for places to affect positive change in the world and to lift people up and to encourage people's best selves. And teaching really was such an incredible outlet for me to do that. And yeah, I ended up being a teacher for 30 years, a professor. I taught a variety of things at my small mountain university. I um, I don't think of it as a detour. I like to think of our lives as having many seasons.
right.
Yeah, everything has its season, and those 30 years was my season to be a teacher, to be a mom, to
Right.
pour my heart and soul into those endeavors. And then lesser Victoria Nash came along and turned me back to my writing life, and now I'm so grateful
Yeah.
that I finally have arrived at the season of my life where I get to be a writer. And I feel very grateful for all of it.
So that begs the question, what are you working on now?
Yes, well, as I said, I've been still very involved with this book since it was released. It's being translated into 34 languages.
That's incredible, really.
It's incredible. I just returned from my 3rd European book tour. I see it in airports and bookshops. It doesn't matter what country I'm in. And here in the United States, I've had such incredible support from my publisher, sustained support, so that apparently more people are reading it now than they were a year ago because of those
Wow.
efforts
Yeah,
from Spiegel and Grau. So incredible. So I say this only in the context of I do have a new novel in my mind.
you do.
I'm working on it a little bit. I'm very excited to get to tell another story, but I haven't cleared a whole lot of space
Right.
for it yet. But come this summer, around July 1st, I've intentionally created a break, and
Okay,
I'm hoping to spend the rest of the year really mostly focusing on this new novel.
good.
Um,
All right.
I've been getting to know the characters, compared to Go as a River. These new characters have felt a bit like strangers to me.
Yeah.
So I've been getting to know the characters, and what I'm learning about myself as a novelist, which I didn't really know with my first, was I really am so drawn to both character and place. I think
Right.
those are the stories I want to tell that are really rooted in both of those things. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm starting with this new book.
So I always have to ask, I mean, what's been 1 or 2 of your favorite books from the past year, or what author inspires you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I loved Alice Wynn's In Memoriam. I don't know, it's been wildly popular in the UK, and it's certainly popular here as well. But she is a lovely, lovely writer. I've met her at a couple of book festivals, and we've gotten to be friends. It's a World War I novel, which would not typically be something that I'm maybe instantly
Drawn to.
drawn to, but
Right.
it's so beautifully written. I love it so much. So In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, I would
I
really,
love that one.
um,
Okay.
I would highly recommend that. And historically, what I've really loved to read are quieter novels like Marilyn Robinson novels. I
Right.
also love nature writers, so I read a wide variety of nature writers, and I'm always reading poetry. In fact, when I have any writer's block, I can't read other people's fiction because I don't like the stories to get mixed up
Yeah.
in my mind. But I will turn to poetry just to remind myself how much language matters, and the rhythm of words. I really constructed every single line in Go as a River very intentionally.
Mhm.
Poetry and language really matters to me, and so I read a lot of poetry.
That's great. Um, so I wanted to ask about Zelda Cooper, her Victoria's friend,
I love,
and which I
yeah,
just loved. I loved their relationship. I mean, I
yeah,
think that was like her one really good friend. And
yes,
so I just wondered if you're a bit like Victoria in a way, a bit of a loner in some sense, and have
yeah,
very few close friends. I thought
yeah.
that friendship was very interesting.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's so interesting that Victoria really is a very solitary character, throughout the novel. Her best friends are her trees.
Right.
And I do love Zelda because, she swoops in kind of towards the end of the
Yeah.
novel as the first modern woman that we
Mhm.
see in the book. She carries her past with confidence. She does
Right.
not have shame. She knows her own worth in the world. She's very much sort of embracing the 60s and some of the
Yeah.
change. This novel opens in 1948. It closes in 1971. The amount of revelation I think that a lot of women had about their power in the world in that era had already impacted Zelda, but Victoria is still, a little unsure of herself. She
Yeah.
has to learn little by little. I would say there's a bit of me in both Victoria and in Zelda.
Zelda.
I love nothing more than to be left alone in the woods. But also like I said, I've loved being a teacher. I loved being out on book tour. I loved meeting the readers.
Right.
There's both parts inside of me, but that quiet sort of solitude that Victoria values in her life, I have a lot of respect for that.
Right.
I see that in a lot of the farmers and ranchers that I know. Of everything they need is there in the land,
Yeah.
and I really admire that. There is part of me that is absolutely true. Um, there's a film contract on this novel,
Well, I was
which,
going to ask you that.
yeah, is sort of slowly evolving.
Mhm.
With the strike in Hollywood last year, my producers have said, everything's a little backed up, everything's a little slow. So, however it evolves, it's beautiful to me. But one of the things I've really thought about is how to tell this story on screen,
Right.
um, with a very cinematic landscape. I think that'll be incredible. But with Victoria being a very solitary character, it'll be
Yeah.
a certain way of storytelling where, to keep the audience engaged. But I think it's a story that can be told well on screen, but I think it'll feel a little different maybe
Yeah.
to a lot of readers, yeah, or
Who could
viewers.
you see playing Victoria Nash?
Yes, I get that question a lot, and I always feel a little bit embarrassed that my answer is always, "I don't know, you tell me," and I'm such a reader, and I love to write and be in the forest, and so I have to admit that I have great respect for good film, but I don't actually watch, film very often. I'm
Okay.
not on very many screens, and so I honestly just don't know. So I've thrown that out occasionally to my readers, and I get
Yeah.
some really wonderful suggestions. Um, I will say this is kind of funny. When the film contract, started happening, my mom instantly was like, "Oh, um, Nicole Kidman has to play Crazy Ruby Alice Akers." And I don't think I've ever passed that on to my producers, but I thought, yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Well, I was thinking of the young woman who played, the lead in Where the Crawdads Sing.
She's lovely.
Her
Yeah,
name escapes me now, but I could see that, her being Victoria Nash, so
yeah, I think someone like that who has a very expressive face, who can really, you can feel their emotions, because
right,
Victoria has a very deep heart, and she's
exactly.
very kind of quiet and shy, you know.
Right.
So I don't know. We shall see. But
Okay.
I'm in very
Exciting.
good hands with my producers. I have the utmost amount of faith that they'll create a beautiful film.
So
Um,
So finally, just one more question, which I always ask everybody. The Girlfriend newsletter and the Girlfriend Book Club is all based on the power of female friendship and how important it is, which is why I loved Zelda and Victoria so much.
yeah.
When you're not reading and writing and camping, is there something you love to do with your girlfriends?
Yes, you know, here in the Gunnison Valley, well, we hike a lot of mountains together and we climb, and you know, we've raised our kids up together, playing in rivers and
Yeah.
being out in the wilderness. But
Oh,
one of the
wonderful.
things we love to do as girlfriends here in the valley is sit around the campfire with a bottle of wine, and it's just, you know, it's we live where there's a lot of snow, and it's actually our leaves are just starting to come out now, so
Oh,
we're
wow.
well behind everybody else.
Yeah.
Our summers are short. We value them deeply, and the best girlfriend gathering that I can possibly have is to start up a big campfire here in my backyard,
Oh,
have
that's
my
great.
girlfriends over, and have a glass of wine. That's what we do here in Colorado, and I love it. Yeah, and I
That's
agree with you about female friendship. When I brought Zelda into the book, that was the entire purpose for that.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is a spoiler, but
That's okay.
I wanted Victoria, if she was going to turn to a human being toward the end of the book for comfort, for a catalyst to what she needed to do, I wanted it to be a woman.
Right.
I really value female friendship, and I wanted to celebrate that in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I thought maybe she would go through her whole life without having one good friend, but then you
Yeah,
brought Zelda in, and I was like, "Oh, this is
yeah.
amazing." I
Yeah,
loved
it
it.
was crucial. She was a crucial catalyst, as is our
Right.
many of our good friends in our lives. They give us that little nudge,
Yeah,
like, "Hey, go out and be your best self," you know?
right.
So, yeah, solitary, hiker that I am, I do love my girlfriends.
Well, thank you so much, Shelley, for being with us tonight. Again, everyone, the book is Go as a River. I think most everybody watching this has read it, but if not, tell your friends to read it. Please pick up a copy of it. It's fantastic. And everybody watching this video tonight, please stay on the Girlfriend Book Club page because I'll be posting some conversation starters so that you guys can talk a little bit about what you loved about the book. Also, I just wanted to say that next month in July, our book is Just for the Summer, and Abby Jimenez is joining us on the third Tuesday of the month. I'm looking forward to that as well. So thank you, Shelley. Have a great evening and congratulations on all your success. I'm so happy for you with your debut novel. It's amazing,
It's
really.
amazing. It's crazy. It's wonderful. Thank you all so much for your support, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.